Hey folks, Chris here. Put a little olive oil in the pan. I'm gonna be once again cooking some tofu while we chat. This is my little kitchen press for the tofu to get the moisture out. And as with previous videos I've done where I'm cooking in the kitchen, I get only one take at this. So, you know, if I say something weird like, Chris's kitchen time! I shouldn't play around the knife in my hands. I can't edit those out because, like I say, this is happening one time. Here I'm cutting it up into some little pieces. I'm not really going to be narrating the whole cooking experience. Kind of like when I code, I'll talk about some other things. But I also know there's some people who are kind of wondering, like, what's he doing? Because they haven't seen a tofu press, which, once again, just squeezes out the moisture. People at a tofu press wind up kind of stacking books and paper towels to get the stuff out. Quick little near one. Heating up. Got a little, like I said, olive oil in the pan. I'll put this away so I don't have oil right next to it. Now, the chat today, naturally born with you getting set up in my kitchen, has to do with the idea that the most accurate ideas are not necessarily the most useful to always be concentrating on. And this is coming from somebody who, as I've disclaimed before, probably while standing at this very kitchen stove, I'm a secular person. Like, I'm not trying to advocate for any sort of, you know, no supernatural stuff going on here, right? To borrow the Michael Scott expression, I'm not even a little bit stitious. But, as an example to this, when I was doing wrestling throughout high school, like, we would often be taught, when you take a shot, which in wrestling is going for the legs, kind of sliding in on your knee to try to get a grip on someone to bring them down, we would practice kind of aiming behind the person. That if you aim for where the person is and then they tuck back and they dodge, then you missed. Right? And when I did a little bit of kickboxing in college, the same thing would come up of, didn't do a whole lot of it, but one of the things we were taught was that it was like, you're not just trying to touch that point, you're trying to hit through it. And it's not like you actually imagine, or it's not like you're literally going to go right through the person. It's that helps you get the momentum you need to do it. Same thing came up in fencing. We were trained not to poke just the edge of a surface, but to really try to go through, not to hurt anybody, not expecting that you're actually going to be going through anything, but again, because otherwise, when they inevitably dodge backwards or create more space, then you miss, or you don't apply enough pressure, or otherwise are at a disadvantage. Now, I've actually heard, and I am even less experienced in something like firearms, but I've actually heard, so this is hearsay, but that apparently in like small arms handling, it's often apparently easier to picture the target closer than it is when aiming. Right? That even though we know up here it's further away, it might be useful in terms of muscle control, in terms of concentration, focus, removal of distractions, to focus on as though the target were closer. Kind of the opposite case to like these, again, kind of mixed martial arts, melee range kind of stuff. I'm going to leave this alone a little bit. First I want to get some of the oil kind of spread around on it. But the reason I mention this today is that all the time when people are getting into projects, whether it's a small business, whether it's a game development project, whatever, it winds up bigger than they meant for it to be. And that sometimes is just kind of how it works. That the idea it could be done in less time was kind of essential to letting it happen in the first place. A lot of people who I know who have made giant games I learned a lot from, even non-commercial giant games, that have taken on big projects, that have run companies that they've been happy with the success of, all of them took longer, were bigger than they expected, in a way that kind of like worked out for the best, but that if they'd really known up front that that's how long it was going to take, probably would have said no to it. Probably would have decided it was not maybe the fight they thought they were going to sign up for. Even knowing this, you can still try to like kind of account for it a little bit in estimates, and we do. But there's this thing called Hofstadter's Law, which says that everything takes longer than you estimate, even when you take into account Hofstadter's Law. Which again is sort of the futility of trying to schedule things to a degree. Oh, I'm doing some working backwards. Oh no! Hallway vacuum cleaner. I can't fight him if I try to talk over it, since I only get one take, because I'm cooking food. I'll leave it alone for a second. So when you're trying to figure out how to get yourself to do goals, how to get yourself to make projects, start a business, whatever it is you're going after, a lot of things you're going to find out there are ideas that might seem a little wacky. And I mentioned this a little bit in the Game Dev Biz Talks the other day, where in the success literature, there's a lot of weird stuff. Right, there's some stuff about quantum vibrations, and there's some stuff about laws of attraction, and there's some things about, as Tim Russell pointed out from Tim Ferriss, laying on a sidewalk in a public place. Like, there's just some weird stuff. And it's almost... It's like you're supposed to know that it's not 100% reality, but that a scientific understanding of it doesn't actually help. That concentrating too much on the realities don't help. That actually, we kind of explicitly covered this, and I took a grad school business course many years ago, where literally one of the things I talked about was like, if the actual odds of success were known ahead of time to entrepreneurs, like we'd have no new businesses. Like it just wouldn't happen. But what winds up happening is when we think about those odds, we hear these things about the number of businesses go out of business in the first year or two. We'll hear about the number of games that get made that don't succeed, etc. You gotta remind yourself from that the ones that do succeed, the ones that do take off, whether it's businesses, games, or otherwise, it's because it's not their first one, right? They're going into it with that new knowledge gained from having first stepped into it with whatever ideas they needed to have to get themselves to try it. There's still, of course, a threshold for this. There's a degree to which, like, confidence can be good, but you also don't want to put in a situation that's not recoverable. And this is a lot of what I've sort of formed a lot of my approaches around, is figuring out, okay, what's the things that takes game developers out of it? And increasingly, I was looking at, like, getyourselftodothings.com stuff. Almost a daily plug, right? Includes people who are trying to start a small business that have nothing to do with games. People who's trying to build an app, right? Software development, nothing to do with games or entertainment. But it's realizing, okay, well, if I don't plan this in a way, this is hard to open, that I can recover from it, then I don't get to take a second chance. And that's no good. Because, like I say, most of those ones that succeed, it wasn't on their first try. It came from trying it. And so you got to figure out what is the range you can stretch yourself at productively. And so it's actually a lot of my other focus in the getyourselftodothings.com stuff is actually coming down with a really clear system for what are the dimensions that we look at to assess the order I should tackle goals in. How do I distinguish which ones I'm ready for in a way that's going to push me, challenge me, but not overwhelm me, not be unrecoverable, something that's just beyond out of my league. And a lot of this has to do with trying to equip people to better try to regulate their own pacing of these things. Because I think between internet resources, between our own practice energy, there's a lot of things we can teach ourselves, but it lacks that structure, it lacks that order. And so a lot of what I try to do to make my solutions scale to help more people is to figure out, okay, well then, when all the resources you're finding are kind of cobbled together, duct taped together, stapled and stitched off different sources, different angles, perspectives, how do we figure out which one we're at the level for? So that's like I say, a lot of what this work has to kind of come back to is trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the ways to put these tasks in order in a way that continually challenges us, might involve some ideas that can seem a little unscientific. And I'm not going anywhere near as close as, like I say, some of the success literature has some stuff that I consider kind of wacky. But there's things that are useful to think about, useful ways to see them, that we can even accept and understand cognitively. Like I said, the person I'm trying to, combat with in mixed martial arts isn't actually further away than I have to act like they are. That the target in a firing arm's range is not actually closer than I imagine that it is, but that these things are useful. And so a lot of it is exploring, okay, what's the intersection of, is there some discernible idea from these patterns people found handy? So I'll tell you what, like my old video now, literally years ago, video about getting out of a rut, which I think is actually still pretty high near my list of kind of like new highlights from my channel for people. That's one that kind of takes an example of where people talk about the secrets and laws of attraction and these ideas that can seem very hocus-pocusy. And part of what I try to do is I try to break down what about that kind of fantastical, magical, weird idea, which turns off some people, turns away some people as just being nonsense, but what about at the heart of it, at the core of it, really is about why and how it has some practical benefit to think that way, to act as if, even if we recognize that that's not really what's going on. That it's a simplification, that it helps us find the confidence, that helps us trust in ourselves. This is one of the things that I think it helps form that bridge. Is one of the things I'm writing about in getyourselftodothings.com. Is this thing that oftentimes what I find when I work with people, new training clients, people in the club, etc., people who have difficulty getting themselves to do things, it's partly from a failure to trust themselves, to believe that they're going to stay with it. Because what happens is, right, I mean, would you start running a marathon if you're not going to finish it? You're not, right? Like, of course not. You don't go out there to run a 200-yard dash and then quit because you didn't finish the marathon. You're not going to start something unless you believe you can finish it. What often happens is people will not really throw themselves into writing a book, making a video course, building their app, finishing their game, because they haven't yet found a way to give themselves the confidence that they will finish, to see themselves through on it. And you think of it a bit like a relay race, right? Like, if I'm going to hand the baton to somebody else and they're just not going to put in the energy, then I'm not going to put in the energy either because we don't stand a chance. Well, that person in the baton race is us in the future. It's you tomorrow. It's you next week, you next month, you next year. And it's finding ways to think that really help us, not just in concept, not just in sort of a magical, nonsensical, fantastical appeal, but genuinely help us find ways that we can trust and believe that that person's going to follow through so that it's worth us throwing our best efforts into it, which is where we start to really challenge ourselves, we start to really feel alive, we start to see the results of our own thinking coming to fruition around us. It's how I've been able to do what I've done with my company or my training resources and helping get those reaching more people in the world than they could have otherwise. And it often began from something where I would just sort of make promises to myself and then figure out how to follow through on those. And so a lot of this material really has to do with it, and GetYourselfToTheThings.com or GetYourselfToTheThings.com site really is again about figuring out how do we take these things we want to do, break them into manageable steps, realistic steps, but things that continually stretch us, that we're neither sort of cycling in our comfort area, but nor are we just irrecoverably in over our heads. So anyway, that's probably enough for the day. I think my tofu is probably ready. I put a little bit of General Tso's on it, put some nutritional yeast, and I'm probably going to eat maybe half this, save the other half for later. Be a snack for dinner. But thanks so much for tuning in. Have another video for you all tomorrow. Bye for now.